Hello and welcome to the InTenDay show, the greatest show, my favorite show, the reason why you canceled Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Peacock, and Hulu was to subscribe to me, the greatest show. Hello, guys, I go by InTenDay, at least on the internet. We are going to be talking about the most important things in life today. We're going to be reacting to another video. When are we not reacting to other videos? Because I've gotten lazy and I just have to react. But we're going to be reacting to what seggs taught me about existentialism, which I didn't know that sex and existentialism, the meaning of life, were connected. But let's see what this lady has to say.
Hi angels, and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about something that's pretty interesting. You could tell it's interesting by the title. Actually, I was really impressed by the title that I came up with because it's such like an eye-catching title. I want to talk about what sex teaches us about existentialism. It took me
I love how she got existentialism because it's existentialism. I love how she said it wrong. She just said existentialism wrong.
20 times to say that word correct, and I nailed it. Okay, so I want to
You did not nail it, but let's keep going.
talk about that. And when we're talking about today, we're not looking at sex through a lustful lens. We're just looking at it from an introspective, like third party point of view. So I was thinking about sex, but in an introspective way, and I was thinking of how most people, when they have it, they don't do it for means or byproduct of something most of the time. Most of the time, people just do it for fun. Now, this video isn't to debate on whether that's right or wrong, because it's just not, this video is just not about that. But I was just thinking how most people, usually, when they do it for the pleasure of it and nothing else. And because of how I was raised, that concept is very new to me, because I was always raised in a way that taught me that when you do something, you can't really do it for the sake of feeling good. Feeling good, happiness can be a byproduct of what you do, but you can't do something just for the sake of being happy.
It's interesting how she says that people have sex for pleasure. That's a very modern idea. And even today, you'll still see people that will say sex is for procreation, sex is for between a man and a woman, and that it's for a marriage. But they put a lot of boundaries or quantifiers on sex. But it's interesting. I don't know. Her take is a very, I would say, almost naive way of perceiving sex. But you know what? We're already talking about existentialism, according to her. So let's see what else she has to say.
Because if you do, you're lazy. If you do that, then you're not being productive. If you do that, then you're wasting your time. You can't just be happy just to be happy. It has to be some type of cost. I was always taught about the cost of being happy rather than expected, or rather than able to just be happy. Obviously, there's more things than sex that allows you to just enjoy, happiness, like eating food. You could get pleasure by that. The byproduct of it is to keep you alive. But, some people eat for the sake of being happy. But I realize that most people, when we live our lives, we always live our life expecting an end goal, or we're always living our lives in search for meaning. And we rarely just live our lives for the sake of feeling happiness or the sake of feeling pleasure. And some people may say, oh, well, in your life, you have to have a purpose. You can't just seek and chase pleasure or happiness, right? And they may even associate chasing happiness as if someone is like a substance abuser, seeking happiness, seeking pleasure. They might associate it with that same type of cyclical, bad habitual pattern, right? Pattern of behavior. But it's kind of sad that when most people think about, living a fulfilled, happy life, they always associate with people trying to find happiness through unhealthy means, like substance abuse, like being a phone addict, scrolling, finding pleasure and happiness through that. But there's ways that every day you can find pleasure and happiness in your life through simple things. It doesn't have to be destructive, it doesn't have to hurt you in any way. You could find happiness just by waking up and making a sandwich. You can find pleasure and enjoyment and fulfillment just by talking to your friends and having a conversation. You don't always have to do these huge deeds, or you don't have to always contribute, a lot of things to find happiness in that. It's rare.
Okay, she said a lot of things. Man, I say that a lot. She said a lot of things, but she did say a lot of things. It's funny how she's actually describing Epicureanism. Mind you, I don't know a thing about the philosophy. I do not. I cheated my way through the one philosophy class I have ever taken. But even though I don't think she knows about Epicureans, but Epicureans believe that the whole purpose of life is to find happiness. Even though she doesn't say, I think I would, if I were to give her any advice, I would say she should look into that. Personally, I do not believe the purpose of life is to be happy, but that's because I think happiness is hard to define, and even if you do find a way to define it, it doesn't sound like the most stable thing. Uh, I think that people can find pleasure in a lot of things. I think there's happiness, but I also think there's this thing called joy, and I think joy is maybe long-term happiness. At least when I think of the word happy, I think of something short-term, like, I don't know, let's just say the Saints winning a football, which is not going to happen, or the Mavs making it to the NBA Finals, and they lose, but, just, I love all these sports references, even though I barely even watch sports. Or let's just say they're going to make another James Bond movie, or another Iron Man, another Marvel movie. But yeah, those things, or my favorite, when Drake drops a song. But those are temporary happiness. I think that having good mental health, I think that having a stable career, living a life full of meaning and purposeness, I think that gives you joy, even if you're unhappy throughout bits and pieces. But I think she and I diverge on when it comes to like happiness, because I think there's nothing wrong with seeking happiness or seeking joy seeking happiness, being happy for the sake of happiness and just having pleasure. But like I said, that's a more Epicurean, which I don't think she says, and I don't think she's going to talk about Epicurean, but she's describing Epicureanism without saying the word Epicurean. And for me personally, in my life experience, it just doesn't make sense to me to live that way, because I know that sadness, I know that pain, I know that discomfort is a part of life. So me trying to just try to be happy all the time just doesn't make sense to me. And also what makes me happy might change. So who knows?
For people to live their lives or do things for the sake of doing it. Like, for example, in college, there's a lot of people that they're studying and they're majoring in things that they don't really want. And I think this is the majority of college students. They're majoring in things that they don't want, but they're doing it for an end goal. They're not studying for the sake of gaining intellect. They're studying to please their parents, or they're studying to, I don't know, become something that they believe other people would admire, and not for their own, personal fulfillment. Or they're also doing this to chase and to find a meaning, But I think that's a really, I wouldn't say bad, but I don't think it's an ideal way to live your life, because anything you chase, there's a reason why you're chasing it, because you don't have it. If you had it, you wouldn't be chasing it. Meaning in life, the more you chase it, the more you're not going to find it, because you can't find meaning. You could make things meaningful, but meaning in itself, I don't think you could find that. I think you make things meaningful. And like I said, not big things. Big things don't have to be meaningful. You could find meaning and happiness and purpose in little things that you do. The only reason
I think she contradicted herself by saying you don't find meaning, but then you make things meaningful and find meaning in that. But I personally believe you do find meaning. I think it's something you can discover. I think it's also something you can make. I think also back to the college thing. College is such a scam if you ask me. But I think yes, there's parental pressure. Also, there's kind of this messaging that, oh, in order to get an XYZ job that pays, so well, you need to go to university. But that's kind of falling apart because entry level kind of doesn't exist anymore. So it's see what happens with that. It's weird. When it comes to meaning, I think meaning is what you make of it. I think meaning is something you kind of have to renegotiate constantly because you constantly ask, what are you doing? What now? Obviously, this isn't for everyone. Some people know their purpose. They know I am going to be a firefighter. Yeah, I don't know why they just want to put out them fires. Other people, for some odd reason, they just know they're supposed to be a NICU nurse. They just want to be with them babies. Other people, it's special education or special needs education. Special, I need some special education. And then other people, it's being a mom or being a dad, being a husband, being a wife. They make that their meaning. I think college is a decent place to go out and explore things. Now, I think with the way that hiring and the economy is, it's not as good as it used to be. I think 20, 30 years ago it was better, but it still is not the worst place to be if you're trying to figure out who you are as a person. Like I said, I disagree with this lady, but it's okay because what do you expect, man? I'm always right, she's wrong, I'm right, and I just have the answers. No, I think her arguments are she's just coming from a different perspective when it comes to meaning.
Reason why humans, the only reason why we chase meaning is because we know that our lives, I'm not going to say that our lives are meaningless, but we understand that no amount of contributions, no amount of intellect we have, no amount of luxuries we have, we're not going to be able to keep it. And it doesn't matter how smart or how powerful we are, at the end of the day, one day we're not going to exist on this earth. So ultimately, I'm not going to say it means nothing, but it's not as meaningful as we believe it is. It doesn't matter how big your accomplishment is. It's not going to, I don't want to say satisfy the loneliness in your heart, but it's not going to suffice, it's not. So I think that's the reason why we chase meaning and we give meaningless things meaning, because they're meaningless. They amount to nothing. So we have this constant chase because I think most of humanity, we all are carrying a void within ourselves. So we use these superficial things, power, luxury, all of these things to fill the void. When we get it, it doesn't suffice. How can it suffice? It's not sustainable. It's what is it going to do? It can't do anything for us. And that's why I say we have to practice finding meaning in small things. We have to, instead of chasing meaning, we should do things that's for the sake of happiness in itself rather than the byproduct of happiness. We think that achieving things, once we achieve this, we will feel happy. But why can't we just do things for the sake of happiness instead of looking for something to be the byproduct of happiness? And I start to think of that, and I think that's the best way to live our life. Another thing.
Yeah, man, it's weird. Disagreeing with people is weird. Like, that's why people are like, "Oh, what's your favorite food?" Like that changes. What's your favorite movie? That changes. I think it's funny. She talks about Epicureanism and then she talks about how, oh, when we die, like we won't take our stuff with it, which is actually low-key kind of nihilism. It's interesting how she's dancing around philosophy without really stating it. So I would really like to know if I'm assuming she's in university. This looks like a dorm room. I would like to know what she is studying and if she has read some philosophy, because it would be very interesting, because then it would add more formal definitions to what she's doing. Let's continue to see what she has to say.
That I was thinking was how creation is the most meaningful thing on this earth. Doesn't matter what you do in your life. I don't care if you're like Mike Tyson or like the one of the greatest. You will never be able to surpass creation itself. Creation is so meaningful that it doesn't need a meaning to give it meaning. Creation doesn't have like a meaning, it just is, you know. That's why there's no beginning to it, there's no end, you can't really track it. It doesn't need a meaning to exist, it just exists. And that, you know, by default, that in itself shows how meaningful it is. It doesn't need anything to justify its existence. I think we should interact with life in that same regard. We should just live our life for the sake of happiness instead of trying to find fulfillment. And some people might misunderstand what I'm saying. I don't think that you should live your life blindly and chase happiness, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying instead of trying to do things for the byproduct of happiness, be happy while you're doing it. Like, for example, if you're doing your schoolwork, for me, let's say if I'm doing my schoolwork, I don't want to think if I get an A, I'll be happy. I'm going to think in terms of, okay, let me still find happiness as I'm studying. Let me find happiness in struggling with this course. Let me find happiness in asking my professors for help even though I'm nervous to ask them. Let me find happiness in these little things, because once I get that A, you know, it's like the dopamine, you know, it's going to rush to my brain, but then after a while it's going to fade away. And the A, you know, I'm going to adapt to the A. I'm going to adapt to the high of the A. So then the A, you know, it doesn't mean anything. So instead of trying to find happiness after doing something, after achieving it, let me just trust the process. Let me find happiness and pleasure in the process as I'm doing it. I think that's the best way to live your life, because if you're always chasing things to give you happiness, to give you meaning, you'll never be fulfilled. It can't work. And the way I live my life, like, I think for me, like I made videos about death and passing. Well, I'm gonna just use the word passing. I've made videos about passing and how I've become more comfortable with the idea of me passing, because everyone should, because we all are going to pass at one time. And I realized that the best way to live life is just to enjoy it. And enjoy it doesn't, like I said, I'm going to reiterate, doesn't mean chasing the highs, you know. It doesn't mean only trying to seek the things that we accept societally as, you know, happy and comforting. It means through the struggles, through the chaos, you could still feel happiness. You could still feel pleasure. You know, you don't have to have sex or eat, you know, the most sugary sweets to feel pleasure. You could just find happiness in living your life.
It's interesting. Well, it's interesting how she's afraid to say the word death. We're not afraid, but I find it, love, that's a strong word. I do like how she doesn't use the word death. She'll say the word passing, which I feel like that's an American thing to do. I think in America and the United States, we try to soften death, even though death, in my opinion, is what gives everything meaning, because this will come to an end. This YouTube channel will come to an end. This YouTube video, sadly, will also come to an end. You know, sadly, I'm going to have to stop talking. And I actually think she's answered her own question. I think that the fact that everything comes to an end, that death will come, and one day the sun will explode and our solar system will come to it. Everything comes to an end. And I think that that's what gives things meaning. Now, whether or not there's happiness, whatever, you know, my mood changes all the time. I don't know about your mood, but my mood changes all the time. So what I find interesting is how she comes to very different conclusions than I do. I would never think like this. But it is interesting how she thinks of things for happiness, just for the sake of happiness. For me, I just do things because I either find them interesting or challenging. And if I become happy, that's great. But I don't really seek out happiness. It's just something that happens sometimes. But, you know, it's not, for me, I don't think it's a guarantee.
And I know that might sound bizarre to some people, but I think the only reason why it does is because the only reason why we experience negative emotions is because we identify with it. Most people don't realize that emotions, that's not us. When we feel sadness, we aren't sad. We are just experiencing sadness. So once you detach yourself from the emotion, you wouldn't feel it. And I know this because I've been doing this more recently. Like, if I get annoyed, I feel the annoyance, crawling up and trying to possess my mind. But then I detach from it. That doesn't mean I don't validate my feelings. That doesn't mean I don't acknowledge it. I acknowledge it. I'm not a robot. It's okay to feel negative emotions, but I don't let it consume me. And I'm able to still find happiness. Well, let's not use happiness. I'm able to still feel and find gratitude and enjoyment when I'm feeling annoyed, because now my baseline, it doesn't matter how angry I get, my baseline, the thing that directs me in my life is to know that, wow, I'm on this earth, so I'm happy for life. If I'm angry, yes, I'm angry, but I'm living, I'm here, I'm on earth, so I'm that gratitude and happiness for life, now it overcomes any negative feelings I experience. And like I said, that doesn't mean that I don't experience negative emotions. I do. The problem isn't negative emotions. It's the extent to which you let it consume you, the extent to which you let it hinder the way you interact and navigate through your life. That's the issue, okay? The negative emotions, we're humans. They come and go, just like positive. Nothing wrong with that. The biggest takeaway today is to understand that you are allowed to feel happiness just for the sake of. You don't need to accomplish something to feel happy. You could find happiness with anything. You are allowed to feel happiness. You don't have to earn it. Just by existing, it gives you that birthright to experience happiness. Maybe not at all times because you're human, but majority. Why? Because the greatest gift that you could ever receive is being birthed on earth. And I think that's something that everyone should feel happy with. And because of that, anytime you feel negative emotion, that feeling of, wow, I'm on this earth, this is a gift, that should overcome any negative emotions. And that should make you feel this baseline of happiness, of pleasure, without searching for it. That in itself is meaningful. That is the biggest meaning you'll ever derive from your experience on earth. So, yeah. I hope this video helps, and thank you for watching. Bye, angels. Love you guys.
Wow, what a video. What a video on existentialism. Man, disagreeing with people is very interesting. She went in a direction I was not expecting. And she really, okay, come on. Like, you talk about sex, and then you only talk about sex for like 2 minutes. Come on, girl. Like, I was expecting a whole, what is this, a minute to win it? This was like, we legitimately barely even talked about sex. I am disappointed. I guess that's what every girl feels. Women must feel this all the time. What is interesting is that she danced around a lot of philosophy, but without saying Epicureanism, nihilism, and she didn't really define what existentialism is, which I don't know off the top of my head, but I know it has to do with your existence and why are we here. I think that's what existentialism is trying to answer, is why are we here? I think what was interesting is she didn't talk about spirituality. She didn't talk about spiritual practices. She didn't talk about the things that most people do for meaning. It was a bit meandering, but overall it's a start. I think that searching for happiness for the sake of happiness, is that what you want to do? There's no problem with that. I just don't know if that's I don't know if that's the best long-term solution. Because it's like, okay, you're going to think, oh, this is what's going to make me happy today. But what about like happy from 5 years or 10 years from now, or if you want to learn new things? I think you have to sometimes go through periods of discomfort in order to experience happiness in the future, which she didn't really talk about. I also wish she had touched on religion, because a lot of people use religion to find purpose. I think religious practices are very important in society, just society in general. But, it's okay. I wonder, I don't know if I'll react to another video about her, but shout out to this philosopher. Shout out, we got an existentialist up in here. I really liked listening to her. I do disagree with most of what she says. I disagree with her conclusion, but that's okay too. It's not that big of a deal. She's saying her opinion. I'm saying my opinion, and that's life. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked, please like and subscribe. My socials being linked down below and at the end of the video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Da chamada